What's up, my Streets of Chaos? This is Kid Rose Gaming, Kid Rose Chaos, Gamer, and we're up here discussing a Final Fantasy VII theory video. I promise this is going to be one of my last ones for a while, but I want to talk about the Final Fantasy VII Multiverse. Sephiroth has created the multiverse. What I'm talking about now, where I'm talking about the multiverse is the fact that Haven't Shown Dirge Cerberus story content is within the actual game. Not to mention Crisis Core being remade. Even though Haven't Shown Dirge Cerberus will most likely never happen in this universe, it'll end with the remake universe, and there's a reason why that is. It's not saying that Dirge Cerberus and Haven't Shown isn't canon. It's not saying that those materials don't exist anymore, even before Crisis. It does exist. It exists in one singularity timeline. After Sephiroth tricked Cloud and them to destroy and kill the Arbiters of Fate, it's caused the entire compilation one. Now, I don't have a PS5, but I have watched gameplay of Intermission. And if you listen closely to Intermission's music scores, besides like the obvious deep brown fights, it sounds like Dirge Cerberus. There's even the ostrich enemy from Dirge Cerberus in Intermission DLC, and even some punk, jazzy, cyberpunk type of theme in episode Intermission, which episode Yuffie. Not to mention, Yuffie wears her Dirge Cerberus cloak. So Dirge Cerberus is happening. Dirge Cerberus does exist. Just not with Vincent involved. Just like with Crisis Core still kept Zack as the forefront, but also created a timeline where Zack lives past the Crisis Core timeline, because Sephiroth has tricked the party into slaying the Arbiters of Fate. And then there's also another reason why I think this is also another multiverse. The character Roche, he was never in the original Final Fantasy VII. And neither are some of the novel characters that you meet. Leslie, Kyrie, and Leslie, who else was there? Leslie, Madam M, and those characters were only in the novels only. But they're in the remake. So even the novel stories are being written into the stuff. You know, sure, it's a prequel of that because, you know, the novel stuff happens in between 7 and having children. But what if I were to tell you that everything is happening at once? Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, Dirge Cerberus, and even parts of Before Crisis. And they're all happening in different timelines. So all the timelines are merged into one. The only thing that we know is a prequel is Crisis Core. Crisis Core, without shadow of a doubt, happened. President Shimmer confirms that with Cloud's talking about soldier degradation, and then the board meeting with Shinra talking about S and G type cells. There was no G cells in the original 7. In fact, G was not even mentioned until Dirge Cerberus originally, and that's before Crisis Core came out. So that wasn't even mentioned. So, you know, it's something, isn't it? So, yeah, so it's happening all at once. The rest of it. Because it's interesting how not only we got a remake of Crisis Core, but it's also the fact that Before Crisis references in it. Such as Avalanche Black. When Barrett gets mad that you talk when Shimmer talks about them have a connection to Wu-Tai. That was Avalanche Black. That was Fujito's cell of Avalanche. So even though Barret is full-fledged Avalanche, he's still embarrassed about his connection to Wutai because he knows about Avalanche Black. And Fujito is an extreme, very extreme Avalanche member. He was like the Professor Hojo of the Avalanche side, if anyone's played before Crisis. So, you know, there's references to Fujito. And also why the Turks have a morally gray outlook rather than the black and white of Final Fantasy VII. There's a reason why that is. Because that stuff happened before Crisis happened already as well. And since it's in between Crisis Core, it happened. The things that's changed is that Advent Children and Dirge of Cerberus are happening within the remake. Such as the final battle when we fight the Arbiters of Fate, the 3 color Arbiters. And I'm not saying it's confirmed. I'm not saying it's 100% true. It's up to Square Enix, Tetsu Nomura, or Kazuji Nojima to tell you if it's, or to post that it's canon. But it is, the way I think of it, it is Kadaj, Laws, Yazoo from Advent Children. So Advent Children did happen within the timeline. And then also Chapter 13 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. We went to the Deep Ground, the very first Deep Ground facility. That if you play Dirge of Cerberus and talk to an NPC on the Shara, will tell you that this was actually used to be a medical bay until it became a bloodfest of soldiers. And this started when Weiss and Nero bought Genesis to the medical bay. All this shit went down. And it's really to train the Sviets to fight the restrictors that are controlling them. Since in this time the restrictors are still alive. But the only thing that's weird is Weiss is not chained up in the intermission DLC trailer. In fact, he's sitting on his throne, letting Shenmue make a clone copy, but I guess he's let out. Then again, you gotta remember, the Deep Ground was let out when the experiments were to take place on them, so I guess that could make sense. But the reason why some of the stuff that you see in the remake don't make sense and why some people hate the remake is, yes, I think, to be honest, I think they got some of these ideas from Marvel and DC. I mean, everyone's doing it. Dragon Ball Super is doing multiverse. Now Pokemon's doing multiverse. All this stuff is multiversal content. So it's to combine everything we know, but in a different way. Where it's not a complete rehash or remake of what's going on. Which is very weird and strange. And it gets hard to explain. Especially how you tell people that these games are happening at the same time. If you pay attention to the nods and everything, these aren't just Easter eggs you're looking at. These are actually stories that have been told before if you played the compilation. If you played Chapter 13 in Final Fantasy VII Remake, played Dirge of Cerberus, and play the last missions in Dirge of Cerberus when Vincent goes down to the Deep Ground base, they look similar. The similar layouts, the healing bags and everything. The only difference is the secret facility is abandoned, meaning that it's no longer used for a deep ground base. It's no longer used for that kind of stuff. And the fact that we also got G-type cells, meaning Genesis is still relevant, even though Shenmue has scrapped every data with, has scrapped every single data with Genesis, Hojo still remembers it. That's because all this is happening at once. G is asleep in the northern cave, in the cave under Deep Ground. Weiss and Nero are active in the remake. Now they should have been expanded on, in my opinion, but they're there. They exist within the timeline. By the time Cloud goes in there to save Aerith, Yuffie and Sonon comes face to face with Nero the Sable, or at least before that, Deep Ground soldiers gone through the hologram battle, and then Scarlet 6 Nero on Yuffie, and then Yuffie fights Nero, and unfortunately Sonon dies. Which is not much of a spoiler alert, because you can really watch the gameplay up on there now. But it's just, all these stories are taking place in one thing. And then also, what's peculiar is we got with Vice. We actually see Vice's hair and face. In the original Crisis Core, it was just blurred figures of soldiers. But you get to see a little bit of Vice's long silver hair when he picks up Genesis' body in the Crisis Core remake. Why would they make a change like that? Not to make the game look better, because this is telling you this exists in the remake. This game, Crisis Core Reunion, is part of the remake. If you want to know the before story of everything that happened before remake, you have to play Crisis Core. But this is not like the PSP Crisis Core. This is telling you this stuff is canon. Everything that we had, and even interviews, they said everything's going to be canon. It is canon. All of it's canon. It's just told differently. It's in with the remake. The only thing that's sequential is Crisis Core does evolve into Final Fantasy VII. It does happen. So, it makes sense why things are happening. And I know my community doesn't really like the remake, but this is probably why, but I like that they explain some stuff, and I like the remake timeline better, just personally because I'm a compilation fan boy as it is. But the reason why the classic Final Fantasy VII fanboys don't like the remake is because with Multiverse it's hard to explain. Like I said, you can have someone who's a really good writer who can write good stuff in the Multiverse, and it's still hard to understand. But you gotta understand all these intellectual properties. Even Star Wars has done it. Everything's done. Lord of the Rings have done it now. These new properties that are coming out with these franchises is combining. The Resident Evil remakes did this. It's not just the Final Fantasy VII remake. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes have changed a lot from their original. Because things have changed. The multiverse content will keep coming. Everything will be in multiverse. Everything will come in bulk. You go into Sam's Club and you're buying a whole bulk of stuff. When you buy Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're getting the rest of the games. Even though it's in parts, of course. But there's a reason why it's in parts, so they can tell all that story. That's why it's important for them to, put all that stuff together. So that's my whole thought, my theory about why I believe this is a multiverse. So may the crystal be with you, and keep it so safe, all that other stuff, like and subscribe.